Today we're going to go through the process of the before and after of painting the Wicked X-Men Beast 1/4 scale 3D printed statue. Before anything can be done with the paint, the model was first prepped. If you haven't done so already, please check out my other videos on this character model with filling in gaps, also how to add magnets, as well as how to prime the model. After the model was primed and it was time for paint, Beast needed to be base coated with a blue. For the choice of blue, I went in with a Magic Blue by Vallejo. Going around the entire model and just really saturating, getting that blue into all of the little crevices of the fur and the hair. So when it came time to actually painting the fur, I had seen a few other examples of where he was just painted quickly blue, quickly shaded, quickly highlighted, but then the details within the fur get lost. And Wicked did such an amazing job at, sculpting this character with the fur. And then within that fur, you had all these little tiny hair strands. I felt it was really important to make sure that every single hair strand on that character just popped off of him. After the blue base coat was put on with the Magic Blue, it was time to go around and start blocking in the shading. Again, most of the detail from this paint is going to come within making sure that each hair strand really stands out and pops. But I also want to go around and make sure that all of the muscle definition, because he is a big, bulky character, I want to make sure all of the muscles really stand out as well. So I'm going around with some Vallejo black and just really going into all of the crevices and outlining all of the major muscle groups and just really darkening all of those muscle group areas nice and dark, going in really tight with the lines at first, just really making sure that black gets in there under all of the little tiny hairs of fur. After I had all the contours darkened in, then afterwards I can come back and start to smooth out my blends. So I came back with the black again, this time kind of fading it, making everything look a little bit more natural and making the actual shading a lot smoother and more consistent looking. The same thing was done for the portrait, just really going around and separating any sculpt and definition within the character. Because he is all fur, just really wanted to make sure certain areas stood out, especially the face. Wanted to make sure the face wasn't getting lost with the actual fur in his head. I wanted to make sure that the face really had some character to it and some separation within the actual sculpt. So again, with that black, just went around the hairline, making sure it separated the actual face from the actual head. Also went into the ears, started to darken up the sculpt of the shading within the ear and any other areas that needed to be shaded. Once all the shading was done and we had some nice smooth blends within the actual muscle groups, it was time to really get to work on making sure this fur really stood out and actually looked like tiny little hairs all over the model. And for that process, I went in with very similar to what a wash, almost like an ink wash, except I did it with acrylic paint. I had used a night blue by Vallejo, also with a transparent base by Vallejo. This way, when the paint flowed onto the model, it wasn't very saturated or opaque. I wanted to make sure it kind of went on semi-transparent, the same way an ink wash would go on to the model. So again, mixing that night blue, which is a really, really dark blue. It's almost like in between a navy blue and a black. It's just a really dark, saturated looking blue. I mixed that in with the transparent base, and then I thinned down the paint a lot. This way it went on very loosely, again, almost like an ink wash. And with the airbrush gun, I just went around the model, making sure that dark blue just fell in between all the crevices of the fur, just making sure all those little hair strands of the fur really stood out. So the same way I would apply an ink wash, you're putting down the paint or the ink, making sure it falls within the crevices, the cracks of the model, and then wiping it off from the top layer, which in this case would be the fur. This way all of the top areas remain bright, and then all that darker blue just falls within the cracks, really highlighting each and every single hair strand. The next step was to do some dry brushing, and for that I brought back the base color, which was the magic blue, except this time again I mixed it with that transparent base, basically kind of working with different layers, making sure they're not going on too opaque, too saturated looking. I'm slowly building up the model with different colors and making sure that fur comes to life in a way, little by little. So when it comes to dry brushing, there's actually two ways to go about it. You could put on the paint very dry, or you could actually wet the brush a little bit. So by wetting the brush, what that does is it allows the actual dry brushing method to go on a little bit more natural looking, a little bit more smoother. This way you don't get really like harsh looking lines when you're doing the dry brushing. So by using the transparent base, it was kind of my way of actually wetting the brush, but at the same time making sure that the paint was going on little by little and not too heavy. So I went around the entire model once again and just dry brushed that magic blue over all the hair strands, and that's really what's going to make the model come to life, that fur come to life, and you can start to see now that the fur is really starting to pop. Every single hair strand is starting to show off onto the model. The next step was to tie everything all in together, kind of make it blend more seamlessly. And for that, I came back with the night blue mixed in with that Vallejo transparent base and lots of thinner. This way it went on very lightly. Again, using the airbrush gun, just lightly misting it over the entire model, bringing all of the colors together, bringing all that shading that was done, kind of breaking it up. This way it wasn't so harsh looking, and just really making all of the blends more seamless looking and not so harsh looking. And by doing all of that layering between the paint back and forth, between different washes, different dry brushing, it really brought out the fur within the model. Once I had the fur to where I wanted it and I was happy with the result, I then clear coated the entire character beast himself. I'll actually have an upcoming video coming out very soon, so stay tuned to the channel. Make sure you're subscribed. So the next step was to work on the belt. So I had used some Sentinel res primer in white and just by hand went around and brushed back over the white onto the belt. This way we can build up a nice deep yellow color for that belt. So when you're painting yellow, and in this case I used Moon Yellow by Vallejo, you want to make sure you have a really light base foundation, in this case, which was the white. There's other tricks out there. Some people like to use pink before putting down the yellow, because yellow is one of those colors to where it's really difficult to get a nice good saturation of the color. It takes a lot of going back and forth and really doing a lot of coats before you build up a nice, deep, rich yellow color. So for this project, we started with a white base coat of that Stynylrez white primer. I did put down another layer of pink after that. Some of the video got lost, so I apologize about that. But after the pink, I did go back and put down the deep yellow using a moon yellow, slowly building it up, making sure that yellow is really nice and saturated looking. Anytime I'm working on a model, I don't like to leave one area not shaded or highlighted. Even when I'm working with black, I want to make sure my blacks are highlighted, and I'll get to that later. But I could have left the belt yellow, but I felt like it looked too simple, so I wanted to just add a little bit of depth to the belt and just a little bit of shading to the belt. So I took some Vallejo transparent yellow, as well as some Vallejo clear orange, which again is also a transparent orange. And I mixed up somewhat of a light wash and just went around anywhere there was raised edges on the belt, because the belt itself wasn't just actually a flat piece of material. The belt actually did have a little bit of a beveled edge to it. So anywhere where there was those beveled edges, I just went in with that orange color and just shaded it very subtly. This way it didn't stand out too much, but at least it had some shading and a little bit of highlighting to the belt. I did that off camera. I went back with a little bit of a brighter yellow in some areas just to highlight the belt in certain spots. Once the belt was finished being painted, because it is yellow and yellow is a difficult color to paint, I wanted to make sure it was sealed in. So again, I came back with the Krylon flat coat, sealed the belt in. This way, when I came back to painting the actual pants black, if I did get a little bit of black onto the yellow, it would be easy to wipe it back off. Again, that's another reason why I always clear coat along the way. So going around by hand, just went in with some Vallejo black and started to block in the areas of where the belt loops would be. I also blocked in the areas under the belt by hand. This way all of the lines look nice and sharp. Once all of the areas were blocked in by hand and I had enough clearance, I came back with the airbrush gun just to finish off the pants and paint them all black. So like I mentioned with the yellow belt, I always like to add some type of shading or highlighting no matter what the color is. So being that the pants are black, you can't really shade black itself, but I did come back and add highlights to the black pants using a dark blue-gray color, also by Vallejo. And just worked my way around the pants, highlighting all of the little wrinkles within the pants, anywhere there were raised areas or areas of the sculpt that I wanted to highlight. All of that got hit with that dark gray bluish color. And by doing that, again, it adds depth to the actual paint. Instead of the pants just looking very flat and black, the pants now had some life to them. They had some better definition within the sculpt to make them look more realistic. The next part of the belt was to work on the X-Men logo and paint the actual X red. For that, I wanted to make sure I got some nice crisp lines. So that I did mask off. Anytime I'm doing masking, I like to use Tamiya tape. I find that it does a great job at making sure that the paint doesn't bleed underneath the tape. So the X on the belt was masked off using the Tamiya tape. Also, another tip and trick is to make sure that you're using a brand new X-Acto blade anytime you're cutting tape. It doesn't matter if you only use the blade once or twice, you really want to make sure it's a brand new blade that you're using when you're cutting the tape. By using a brand new blade, it allows the blade to do all the work for you. You can lightly glide across the tape and the tape will actually cut almost like it's cutting on its own. If you're using a duller blade, you risk cutting into the model and leaving cut marks on the model. So little by little, the X section was masked off. And when it came time for actual paint, before going in with the actual red color for the X logo, and before spraying it red, here's another tip or trick. When you have an area masked off and you are worried about paint bleed, use the color that's under the tape and spray that first. This way, if there is any paint bleed, it'll be the same color. So for this example, the belt area was already black. So before I even sprayed the red, I sprayed black first. This way, even if there was a chance of paint bleed, the paint bleed is going to match the color underneath, which was the black. Once I did that little trick, it was now time to actually paint the actual red color, and for that I used a carmine red by Vallejo. It's not a very vibrant or bright red, but because I was working off of a black base coat, I wanted to slowly build up the red and make it brighter and brighter. So we started off with somewhat of a darker red just to add some depth to the color. When painting a nice vibrant red, I usually like to start off with either like a carmine red or just a regular flat red. And then again, another tip or trick that I like to do is I come back later on with a transparent red. I find that transparent red has a really nice, strong color, very vibrant red color look to it. So anytime I'm painting reds, I'll apply whatever red color that I want to use first just to get down the actual color, and then I come back with a transparent red if I want it to look really bright and vibrant. The next step of this project was to separate the fur from the actual skin. With the character Beast, he does have some areas that are skin. He's not just all fur. For example, his face has some skin showing. His hands are all skin, as well as his feet. So I wanted to add some separation between the actual fur color, which was blue, and then the actual areas of the skin. This way that kind of stood out and had some contrast between the skin and the fur. And for that, I used some Sombre Gray from the Vallejo Game Color series, mixed in with a little bit of a transparent base, again, also by Vallejo. This way it just kind of went on like a glaze. This way it still had a little bit of a bluish tint to match his fur, but we're just lightening up those areas just a little bit more to add a little bit more gray into the mix. So going around with the airbrush gun and spraying that transparent gray, it kind of lightly misted over all of the blue areas. This way you still see the blue, but now the gray kind of creates this glaze on top of it to just highlight all of the little raised edges on the skin. After the skin was sprayed with the transparent gray, just to lightly tint it a different color, I did come back with the gray by itself, this time without any transparency mixed to it, and lightly went around and dry brushed the hands as well as the face, this way to bring out all of the details within the top areas of the sculpt on the model, such as all the veins within his hands and the wrinkles within his face. Also for the portrait and the hands, I went in off camera and I mixed in a rosy flesh tone color and really subtly went around the cheek area of the face and certain areas of the hands just to make it look like some blood flow was going on under the skin, just to, again, try to bring him to life, make him look like he's very realistic. So in this example, you'll see that the actual portrait itself is very contrast between the gray skin and the blue fur within the hair. But if you look really carefully, you'll see certain areas to where it almost looks a little bit purplish, like the skin has some blood flow to it. Personally, I was happy with this result. I thought it looked really cool. I really liked the contrast between the fur and the skin. However, the collector I was painting this for didn't like the strong contrast. So later on in the video, you'll see that the skin kind of goes back to blue because that was the decision by the collector. He wanted to make the skin more bluish looking, this way it matched the fur, which in the end is more comic book accurate, but I really love the way that skin looked with the dark gray mixed in with the blue. When it came time to painting the teeth as well as the eyes, anytime you're painting teeth or even eyes, you don't want to use a bright white color. It looks very unnatural. It's just way too bright. So again, another tip or trick when painting teeth or when painting the white of eyes is to use a bright gray. And in this case, we're using Sky Gray by Vallejo. It's my favorite color to use anytime I'm painting eyes or teeth. The next step of the project was to paint the mouth. His mouth is open, so I really want to get in there and bring some purples and reds for the tongue as well as the inside colors of the mouth. So we're starting off with just a straight up purple by Vallejo and base coating the tongue with that purple. Afterwards, I came back with some transparent red, also mixed in with some transparent base, just to really put it on very lightly and just to slowly start building up the red in certain areas. The goal for the mouth was to have it somewhat of a purplish to a reddish color, to where the actual inside of the mouth was more purple and the actual tongue was a little bit more purplish and reddish looking. Anytime I'm painting teeth or eyes, I like to clear coat them with a satin varnish. This way it looks a little bit more lifelike and brings some nice highlights to those areas. And for that, I'm using a satin varnish by Deco Art, which can be applied by hand. Again, I'll have an entire video covering different clear coats and different products, so stay tuned and subscribe to the channel for an upcoming video on how to clear coat your models. And as you can see, the satin really adds a nice touch, making the mouth look really wet, giving the teeth a little bit of a shine. And then as for the eyes, I really wanted the eyes to look like they were glowing, like he was really an animal, a beast. So the eyes were also satin coated with a clear coat. And then afterwards, I came back with a gloss coat for the eyes, just to really, again, make the eyes look like they were glowing. And I also did use the gloss coat on the inside of the mouth, not on the teeth. The teeth stayed satin because teeth shouldn't be super glossy looking. But anytime you want to make an area look wet, such as a tongue, you want to come in with a gloss varnish, and it just really brings the character and the model to life. So the next part was to paint the base, and when it came to the base, there really was no easy way to go about painting the base. Normally with bases you might have some removable parts. With this base, everything was just one big solid chunk of base. The base consisted of a sentinel hand, which was being destroyed, and then you had these areas that were engulfed within flames. So to try to get in and paint the flames one color and then try to paint all the sentinel areas one color were extremely difficult to decide what to do first. I knew going in, well, I could try to mask off the flames and then paint the sentinel parts, or I can mask off the sentinel and then paint the flames. But again, because the base was so complex and nothing on the base was removable, it became one of those decisions and realizations that, well, okay, I'm going to have to go back and forth, touching up both areas, touching up the fire, and then touching up the sentinel, and back and forth, touching up the sentinel, and then touching up the fire. It was a very long back and forth process. So as you can see, the first step was just to separate the flame color from the actual base color, which was originally primed in gray. Because again, when you're painting flames, and I did an entire video on painting flames, so I'm not going to go too in depth in this video. So if you want to learn how to paint fire, how to paint flames, definitely go check out my previous video on how to go about doing so. It's called How to Paint Fire, and I'll leave a little thumbnail on the video. This way you know what to look for. But again, when painting yellow, yellow is such a difficult color to really lay down solid and opaque and just really get nice coverage. So anytime you're painting yellows, you want to make sure you're starting off with some type of light base coat. And in this case, you definitely don't want to start off with black. So I had to go back around and just prime the areas where the flames were with some Sentinel Res primer in white. And then for the actual metallic areas, I went in with some dull aluminum by Vallejo, the metal color series. It's always my go-to paint anytime I want to use some type of metallic color. They have an entire series of different shades of metallics, anywhere from bronzes to aluminums to gunmetals. I highly recommend Vallejo's metal color series. But because the base consisted of these bright flames and then also these metallic areas, when painting metallic, you want to make sure you have a black base coat. But when you're painting fire, you want to make sure you have a white base coat. So again, it was very difficult to try to work on the two areas at the same time. It's literally the opposite of one another. You have white on one side and then you have black in the middle. But carefully going around the base with that dull aluminum color, making sure not to spray into the fire. The entire metal areas were base coated with a dull aluminum. And then to get that metallic purple color that a sentinel has, he's usually either a metallic purple or a metallic blue. Because Beast himself was already blue, the decision was to make the base purple. This way we had some nice contrast between the actual character and the base, and this way the two popped against one another. So there's a few ways I go about painting metal. One would be to put down a aluminum color first, which is what we did on this project, and then later I come back with a transparent color, which in this case would be the purple, and then just slightly overlay it on top of the metallic aluminum color, which creates a purpley looking metallic, if that makes sense. So with the purple by Vallejo mixed in with the clear base transparent, a transparent purple was created and overlaid on top of that dull aluminum. Afterwards, I really wanted to deepen that purple and make it look a lot stronger in some areas. So the other option for when doing metallics is you can use a pearl. When working with pearls, I just like to mix up my own pearl colors. So again, Vallejo makes a pearl medium that you could actually add to your paint. In this case, I wanted it to go on, again, transparent. So I mixed in Vallejo's pearl medium with the purple, but also with a transparent base. This way it went on as a glaze. And also thinned down with my thinner. This way it went on nice and lightly. If you ever want to see what I use for thinner, I actually make my own thinner. I have an entire, again, video on that. How to get started with airbrushing, how to get started with compressors, mixing paints, creating your own thinner. So again, definitely check out that video if you want to see how to make your own thinner. But basically my thinner consists of isopropyl alcohol, distilled water, and a little bit of glycol, which reduces the drying time and prevents dry tip on your airbrush gun. I highly recommend checking out that video, as that combination works really great with Vallejo's paint. So going around the base and adding that pearl really added a lot of depth to the base and added a nice pop of color. After I painted the purple on the base, the entire base was clear coated. This way afterwards I can mask off the base with my Tamiya tape. And again, I'm not going to go too in depth onto painting the actual flames because, like I said, I have an entire video dedicated to just painting the flames on this base called How to Paint Fire. But basically we started off with the Stynylrez white primer as a base coat. As for the yellow, I use a moon yellow. I find it gives great saturation for a nice consistent yellow color. And then starting to highlight the flames, I went in with a clear orange mixed in with a transparent yellow to slowly build up the colors of the fire. And here's how the flames are looking with just the first layer. Up next, we want to add more depth to that fire color. So this time we're coming back with just a clear orange by itself. And lightly going around, just spraying all the crevices of the flame, just really highlighting the sculpt of the flame itself. And then finally, to add even more depth to the fire, because when you're working with fire, it's a mixture of yellows, oranges, reds. You could have some darker reds, you could even have some blacks if you want to add like an ash or smoke effect. But the next step was to come back with some transparent red and just highlight all the tips to make it look like the fire was really coming to life and that it was burning. The next step was to paint the little screen window area on the base. For that, we decided on a gold. This way it complements the purple as well as the oranges. If you're catching on by now, you can see I like to use complementary colors. We have Beast, which is blue, against the orange fire, and then we have that purple base with tones of gold. Gold was used also to paint the wires, so it's a really nice combination color palette that was put down for this project. For the actual window slash screen of that Sentinel base, I went in with an acrylic ink using deep gold. And I also used that deep gold color for all the tips of the wires, which really added some nice contrast between all the different colors. So here's a look at the base all finished. We have that nice metallic purple on the actual Sentinel itself. We have this nice bright orange vibrant fire coming off from the sides as well as the lower front. The black and gold on the cables. And then finally that dull aluminum wrapping all around the base. It all really came together nicely and looks really fantastic. With the base out of the way and Beast almost complete, I did some final touches off camera. So the next step was to get Beast back on that base, and let's take a look at the final result. I'm really happy with the way Beast turned out. All of the colors play off one another really nicely. The actual sculpt itself is really fantastic, an amazing job sculpted by the Wicked team. In my opinion, this is the best Beast statue out there, and it was a pleasure to work on. So to all you X-Men fans, I hope I brought the character justice. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you had fun and maybe learned something. If you enjoy these type of videos, please hit the thumbs up button. If you're already not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. I have plenty of more projects on the way, as well as some really big announcements coming very soon. So stay tuned to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Take care.